I'd like to start off today with a story about maple sap and maple syrup, and then give you a little bit of history of maple sugaring. And there's a video I have for you called The Maple Sugar Farmer, and after the video I'll tell you how to get to our sugar bush and explain what that is. And there are demonstrations going on there throughout the day of several different things that we'll talk about a little bit today. This story that I'd like to share with you comes from a tribe of Indians called the Anishinaabe Indians, who live not here in Pennsylvania, but they live north and west of us on the shores of what we know today to be the Great Lakes. And this is their story about how maple sap came to be. Before I start, I have to get a couple things out here. Okay. A long time ago, when the world was fresh and new, it was a time when life was good for people. It was a time when the weather was perfect all year long. It was never too hot or never too cold, and there was just enough rain at just the right times. It was a time when there was plenty of food in the fields and the forest for people to eat, and no one ever went hungry. And it was a time when a thick, sweet, golden syrup flowed through the branches of maple trees. And when anyone wanted some of this syrup, all they had to do was reach up, break off a maple branch, and catch that syrup as it dripped out. And they could eat it just like that. Well, one day during this time, Manabazo decided to visit his friends, the Anishinaabe. And he walked to where their village was, and when he got there, was very surprised to find that no one was there. Now that was kind of unusual, because just like in towns and villages today, there was almost always someone around. But on this day, he went from lodge to lodge to lodge in the village where people lived, and couldn't find anyone. Well, he thought they must all be out working in the fields. So he walked out of the village to the fields, and when he got there, no one was there. Well, he was puzzled by this, but he thought, maybe they're on the other side of the village picking berries. So he walked around the village to where the berry bushes grew, and when he got there, no one was there. Well, once again, he was surprised by this, but he thought, well, maybe they're down at the lake catching fish. So he walked down to the lake shore, and when he got there, no one was there. Well, by this time, he was a little frustrated. He had traveled a long way to visit with his friends, the Anishinaabes, and he really wanted to see them. So after a while, he decided to go back to the village, thinking that while he had been out looking for everyone, they had returned and now he could visit with them. Well, the trail that he took that led from the lake to the village went through a forest. And when he stepped into that forest, he stopped. Because there, underneath the tall maple trees, lying on the ground, on their backs, with their mouths wide open, catching that thick, sweet syrup as it dripped out, were all the people of the village. Well, he took one look at this sight and he said, this is not good. These people are going to lay around all day drinking syrup and become fat and lazy. Pretty soon they won't tend their crops, they won't look after their animals. Their village will become a mess. I must do something about this. And so he did. He walked back toward the lake because growing there were some large birch trees. Now, birch trees have thin bark and it peels off pretty easily. So he peeled off a big piece of birch bark and he formed it into a bucket. And he used that to scoop up some cold, clear water from the lake. He carried that with him back into the forest. And there he climbed into the tops of the tallest maple trees and started to pour this water in. And as he did so, that thick, sweet syrup that had been dripping out started to get thinner and thinner and thinner. And pretty soon it wasn't very sweet at all anymore. And at that point he said, now this is good. Now if people want a thick, sweet syrup, they'll have to work hard to get it. They'll have to collect sap from many trees and boil it for many hours. Just to make sure they don't do this every day, all year long, and forget about their other chores and duties, I'll make it so it only happens one time of year that they can do this, just as winter's about to end and just before spring begins. And so, according to the Anishinaabes, it is to this day. When we want a thick, sweet syrup, we work hard to get it. We have to collect sap from many trees, something you'll get a chance to see today, and we have to boil it down for many hours, something else you get a chance to see today. And we can only do it one time of year. This time, just as winter's about to end, and it looks like it finally is about to end, and just before spring begins. And when we get sap out of the tree today, it's no longer thick and sweet and golden, but looks like this. What does that look like to you?
Water.
You're right. Maple sap is mostly water, but there's something else in it. Anybody know what that something else is? The magic ingredient.
I have a guess.
I'm sorry?
I have a guess.
Okay, go ahead.
Sap.
It is sap, but it has something that we use and the Native Americans use.
Sugar.
There you go, very good. There's a little bit of sugar in there. That's what the Native Americans took advantage of, and that's what we take advantage of today to make something nice and sweet. So, you know, life for the Native Americans was a lot different than it is for us today, obviously. For them to get the sap out of the tree, they had to make a deep cut through the bark into the trunk of the tree. And when the sap was dripping, they had to catch that in something. Now, some tribes of Indians that lived to the far north actually made buckets out of birch bark to catch that sap, just like in the story. Other tribes of Indians that didn't have large birch trees, well, they would cut a lot of sections of log like this, and they would hollow them out, probably a little bit deeper than this one, and put those under the trees that they had cut into and let the sap drip into them. Unfortunately, I don't think mine would work too well anymore. It's been around too many years, it's dried and cracked. But you know, Native Americans made fresh ones every year, and it worked just fine for them.